It's November 3rd here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the latest over in Gaza. Israeli forces on Thursday bombed the Jabalia refugee camp in northern Gaza for a third straight day on Thursday. Egyptian authorities say around 344 nationals passed through the Rafah border crossing on the second day the border opened, with plans to help about 7,000 more people to escape the war-ravaged Gaza Strip. President Yoon Suk-yeol has called for global standards on digital governance and global cooperation so that artificial intelligence does not put freedom and democracy around the world at risk. Russia has officially opened the door to new nuclear testing, with the leader Vladimir Putin signing a bill revoking his country's ratification of the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. The U.S. called on Moscow to commit to not testing nuclear weapons. Israeli forces have surrounded Gaza City on 3 sides and are operating inside the city. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the military has pushed through the outskirts of the region. Our Lee Seung-jae starts us off.
The Israel Defense Forces Chief of Staff said Thursday that Israeli forces have surrounded Gaza City on 3 sides and are currently operating at the heart of the city, fighting in close quarters. Israeli military spokesman Daniel Hagari also warned that with the Israeli forces beginning their operation inside Gaza City, a ceasefire is not currently on the table. And according to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his forces are currently at the height of the battle with Hamas, but have had impressive successes and continue to advance. Meanwhile, the Israeli Prime Minister also said he'd made no decision on supplying fuel to the war-torn Gaza Strip, where hospitals are reportedly running dangerously low on energy supplies. His comments come after the chief of Israel's armed forces earlier signaled a willingness to ease the fuel embargo on the Palestinian enclave if hospitals can be refueled under supervision. The Israeli military has also continued to target Hamas commanders with strikes against recognized refugee camps in Gaza. The Jabalia camp was bombarded for the 3rd straight day, with Palestinian authorities saying the attacks have so far killed 195 people, with 120 missing. Thursday's airstrikes also included a smaller camp located in Barej, home to about 46,000 Palestinian refugees registered with the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees. Gazan authorities say 15 people were killed in a strike at the Barej camp. Palestinian authorities say more than 9,000 of its people have been killed since October 7th, with more than half of Gaza's population displaced. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The Egyptian Health Ministry reports that 344 foreign nationals passed through the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt on Thursday, marking the 2nd day that the border has been open. Among them was a family of 5 South Korean nationals, and dozens of injured Palestinians were also moved out from the war-ravaged Strip for medical treatment. The Egyptian government said it plans to help evacuate around 7,000 foreigners and dual nationals from the Gaza Strip without providing a specific timeline. Now, Rafah is the only Gazan border crossing that isn't under Israeli control, and it is a crucial gateway for humanitarian support. On Wednesday, the crossing opened for the first time since the Israel-Hamas war erupted, allowing at least 361 foreign nationals and 76 injured Palestinians to pass through. The U.S. has criticized Russia for taking a significant step in the wrong direction by revoking its nuclear test ban and called on Moscow to commit not to test nuclear weapons. Now, the remarks came in a statement on Thursday by U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, who expressed concerns over Russia leaving the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty for raising tensions and nuclear risks amid its war in Ukraine. He addressed Russian officials who said the move does not mean resuming nuclear testing and urged Moscow to hold to those statements. The remarks come as Russian President Vladimir Putin signed off on a law to revoke the ratification of the global treaty, which Moscow claims is to mirror the U.S., which has signed but not ratified the treaty. Moscow has said it will not conduct any tests until Washington does. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is set to visit Seoul later this month to take part in annual bilateral defense ministerial talks and other events. Now, according to the Pentagon on Thursday, Austin will attend the security consultative meeting with his new South Korean counterpart Shin Won-sik and meet other senior South Korean officials, where he'll look to emphasize the U.S. ironclad security commitment to South Korea. He will also attend an inaugural defense ministerial meeting involving UN Command member states. The Pentagon chief's visit is part of a three-nation tour, which includes stops in India and Indonesia, where Washington looks to maintain its strategic focus on the Indo-Pacific region. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol again addressed world leaders on the need for global cooperation on governing artificial intelligence, after 28 governments, including South Korea, the UK, the US, and China, earlier agreed to jointly address potentially catastrophic risks to the world. Our President's correspondent Oh Soo-young has the details.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has called for global standards on digital governance and a body that oversees it, warning that without principles, artificial intelligence could threaten freedom and democracy around the world. This came at the first AI Safety Summit held in southeast England, where Yoon virtually joined discussions with world leaders, researchers and tech executives to address the unknown and potentially destabilizing impact of AI across societies. Yoon said the emergence of generative AI such as ChatGPT has improved everyday convenience and industrial productivity, but has widened economic gaps and increased the proliferation of fake news that undermines freedom and electoral systems. The president stressed that digital technologies, including AI, should contribute to expanding human freedom and welfare and not threaten the safety of individuals and societies. He said this also means there should be equal opportunities to innovate with AI and reap its benefits. Here, Yoon noted that South Korea in September announced a digital Bill of Rights based on 5 principles: freedom, fairness, safety, innovation, and solidarity. At the 2-day forum, some 28 governments, including South Korea, the UK, and the United States and China, penned the so-called Bletchley Declaration, the world's first joint document on ensuring AI is developed safely and responsibly. Recognizing that the technology could pose catastrophic risk to humanity, the document stressed the danger of AI systems, stirring further cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, and the development of biological weapons. The governments agreed to work together to identify shared concerns and build a scientific understanding of the risks, in discussions going forward to design, develop, and use AI in ways that are human-centric, trustworthy, and responsible, with a pro-innovation and proportionate governance.
So we have agreed that Bletchley Park should be the first of a series of international safety summits, with both Korea and France agreeing to host further summits next year. The late Stephen Hawking once said, "AI is likely to be the best or worst thing to happen to humanity." If we can sustain the collaboration that we have fostered over these last 2 days, I profoundly believe that we can make it the best.
President Yoon pledged to carefully heed the opinions of each country and prepare for follow-up discussions next year. His office says South Korea and the UK have agreed to co-host a mini virtual summit in 6 months' time, ahead of the second AI Safety Summit this time next year. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
President Yoon Suk-yeol will hold a bilateral summit today with Ireland's Prime Minister Leo Varadkar, who is currently in Seoul heading an economic delegation. According to officials, President Yoon will meet with the Irish Taoiseach at the Yongsan Presidential Office and discuss trade relations and bilateral cooperation in various fields upon the 40th anniversary of South Korea-Ireland ties. Varadkar told Irish media that he'll discuss ways to strengthen partnerships in areas such as climate change, global insecurity, threats to democracy, and the rule of law. Ireland is also looking to deepen its engagement with the Asia-Pacific region and sees Seoul as a crucial gateway to the region. Arirang News will hold a one-on-one interview with the Irish PM, which will be broadcast in our 6 p.m. newscast along with updates on the summit. Winter influenza has been going around here in South Korea, especially at schools. And as we head into the first official winter since COVID-19 was declared endemic, what can we do to stay strong and healthy? For more, let's turn to Dr. Alice Tian this morning. Welcome back, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
I know this is a very basic question, but Dr. Tian, I have to ask you, what is the difference between cold and flu?
Right, so every flu season I get this question asked a lot. In terms of difference, it's caused by different virus. So influenza is caused by the influenza virus, and the cold can be caused by a number of different viruses, such as rhinovirus or human coronavirus. In terms of symptoms, the flu usually is very abrupt in onset of symptoms, and the symptoms can be quite intense. Whereas with cold, I often say, nobody dies of a cold. It's more of a winter nuisance. We'll have symptoms primarily in the nose, nasal symptoms such as runny nose, stuffy nose. We feel kind of crummy for a few days, but it goes away. Nobody dies of a cold. It doesn't progress into a more severe disease. The flu, however, can be quite severe. And in terms of the symptoms, as I said, they can be quite intense. So typically we'll have a high fever, headache, muscle aches, sore throat, cough, and people are feeling miserable. I've had very healthy, strong people come in to me in the clinic and just they're exhausted. They're so tired they can't go into work. The thing with the flu as well is it can progress to pneumonia, it can progress to heart disease, it can lead people into the hospital for admission, and it can also be fatal. Nobody dies of a cold, however. And so there are a couple of differences, but as I said, there's overlap in symptoms. Sometimes it's hard to tell. So if you are not feeling well, you have high fever, and the symptoms are prolonged, say more than 3 to 5 days, then you may want to go and see your doctor and get checked out, because that's really the only way to differentiate between the two is to get tested.
Right. It sounds like flu is whole another level from having a cold. Now, some people who have recovered from the flu this season are arguing that the flu was worse than coronavirus. Now, Dr. Tan, is that so? Is flu really harder to recover from than COVID-19?
I think it's case by case, because there are certain groups, certain populations who are prone to having severe symptoms. So for influenza, children, small children, infants are prone to having severe disease. Also pregnant women and people over the age of 60, 65 are prone to having severe disease when they get influenza. So if the person that you spoke to was in one of those age categories, and certainly we would expect that they would have a hard time recovering from the flu. Also with COVID, now, it's been in circulation in the world for more than 3 years. Most people have had at least one episode of COVID, and we've built up a certain amount of immunity to COVID. And so when people get COVID these days, most of the time the cases are mild. And so I think there's just a difference in terms of who you're talking about, in terms of their immunity status, and then their condition overall, whether or not they've been vaccinated as well.
Definitely. That's the thing. Flu in children is apparently hard to spot because symptoms like high fever, like you mentioned, are not as prominent or noticeable. What's the reason behind that?
Well, I think there's a spectrum of symptoms that are possible with influenza, but some pediatricians this season have reported seeing cases of what they're calling stealth influenza. In other words, the child will not necessarily have a very high fever, maybe just a mild a fever. They'll have a cough that lingers for days and days and days, and it's not really detected that it's influenza, a case of influenza, until the mother brings a child in to get tested, and then they discover the diagnosis. And the problem with this, of course, is during this entire time that the child has had symptoms, they're spreading influenza to their classmates, to their friends, to their peers, and then unfortunately, adults can also get infected. And then if it's a high-risk adult who gets influenza from the child, then it can lead to a serious case of influenza.
Definitely. The thing is, it's very contagious. Now, health experts, medical experts, including you, Dr. Tan, are advising people to get vaccines for both flu and COVID-19. I've talked to numerous experts about this. Are you on the same page?
Absolutely. So, but it depends on if you're on, you're in that high risk category. So we recommend seasonal influenza vaccination for children between the age of 6 months and 13 years, for pregnant women, and for the elderly and people with chronic diseases. Everyone should get a flu shot. And if you haven't yet, this is the time to get it. And unfortunately, in Korea, as of October 19th, only about 25% of young children, pregnant women have gotten their influenza vaccine. The vaccination rate is a little bit better for the elderly. It's 43%, but you can tell we have a long ways to go in terms of protecting our population from what looks to be a particularly severe flu season. And I say it looks like it's going to be severe because the baseline level of influenza cases in the community is still quite high, and it's been high. It's very strange. It's been high for almost a year now. But we're seeing a spike in people who are admitted because of influenza, so with severe influenza. And this rise in admissions due to influenza is starting about a month earlier than last year. And so I'm very concerned that people are not adequately protected. The same thing goes with COVID. There's an overlap in terms of who's at risk for severe COVID. And so getting the booster, the most recent variation of the booster, is a good idea if you are elderly, if you are living in a high-risk situation. In terms of whether or not children should get vaccinated, every country has their own guidelines. In the U.S., they recommend the new COVID booster for anyone greater than 6 months of age. In Korea, it's more in line with the flu recommendations in terms of who should get vaccinated for COVID this year.
Sure. All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Tan, as always, for your insight. You have a great day.
Thank you.
The 2023 K-Startup Grand Challenge event that started on October 31st wrapped up its run on Thursday. This event was founded in 2016 by the Ministry of SMEs and Startups to help startups worldwide that wanted to grow their businesses in South Korea. This year, 49 global teams selected from among almost 2,000 startup applicants were given the chance to participate in the Business Acceleration Program. The global participants, including startups in the fields of artificial intelligence, e-business, and green technology, received support and advice from South Korean companies. At an award ceremony on the last day, the top 20 performers were rewarded with additional follow-up support to run their business in Korea. South Korea is hopeful that the Middle East will be a new hub for business opportunities for its local firms, with President Yoon Suk-yeol recently carrying out state visits to Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Then, what should South Korean firms be looking out for? Our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
Interest in the Middle Eastern market is currently very high in South Korea. The country's trade volume with Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar jumped 63.1% on year in 2022 compared to the 12.3% increase with the world. While the first Middle East boom mostly involved construction orders, the second includes various new industries. One company, Planty Farm, has already secured deals in a major new industry that the Middle East is seeking to grow: smart farms. Planty Farm became the first company from Korea to build a smart farm in Kuwait and more recently formed a joint venture with a UAE firm to begin construction on one. Countries in the Middle East are taking a special interest in South Korea's smart farming technology as it's one of the most water-stressed regions in the world. The vertical smart farms like this one can mass-produce vegetables all year regardless of the weather. These plants, grown on vertically stacked racks, don't need natural sunlight, soil, or water, thanks to the LED grow lights and sensors that control water pH and humidity levels. But there's still much left to do.
We need to keep doing market research to find what people need, and right partner and customer also need to keep developing, expanding our lineup. Most of Korean agtech companies are relatively small businesses, so they need financial support.
While the MOUs indicate strong interest in conducting business with South Korea, further steps need to be taken to create real economic value.
It is necessary for Korean government to provide diplomatic backups, since Middle East countries pay relatively more attention to diplomatic and religious justification in economic partnership.
It's also important for South Korea to be aware that other major economies are vying to win contracts in the Middle East. The expert said that in the competition against Chinese firms, companies should emphasize their past success with industrial development, and against U.S. firms, the price competitiveness and quality assurance. 이수진, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Ji-young, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Western Europe, where Storm Ciarán has killed at least 7 and left dozens injured. Storm Ciarán on Thursday battered the UK, Belgium, Spain and France, as well as other areas, causing widespread disruption. It brought heavy torrential rain and winds of up to 200 kilometers per hour. Almost 20,000 UK residents suffered from power cuts around noon on Thursday, while many homes were damaged. Schools closed and airlines and train operators temporarily suspended services across Western Europe. Now, in the US on Thursday, the House passed a bill worth $14.3 billion in military aid for Israel as Tel Aviv continues its fight against Hamas. The Republican-led bill won the House votes by a margin of 226 to 196. The Democratic-led Senate had already proposed pairing aid for Israel with additional assistance for Ukraine in its war against Russia, but Republicans are opposing any additional aid for Ukraine. Democrat Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called the newly passed House GOP bill a deeply flawed proposal. In the US on Thursday, an arraignment was held for Dwayne Keith Davis over the 1996 murder of hip-hop music icon Tupac Shakur. Davis, also known as Keith D, pleaded not guilty to the charge of murder with a deadly weapon. He has been accused of providing the firearm to a passenger in the Las Vegas drive-by shooting that fatally wounded Tupac. He is allegedly the only surviving person who was in the vehicle. Davis' charge was prompted by his own 2019 tell-all memoir and multiple interviews where he vividly described the crime scene. The 60-year-old was arrested on September 29th in Henderson, a city near Las Vegas, and remains jailed without bail. And finally, to Switzerland, where auction house Christie's Geneva is set to take bids on what it describes as the largest internally flawless fancy vivid blue diamond to appear at auction. Known as the Blue Royale, a Christie's representative said the gemstone could sell for up to $50 million. The 17.6-carat Blue Royale is preset in a ring and will go under the hammer alongside other rare jewels on November 7th, with interest said to be high following a world tour of the diamond. In 2016, Christie sold the Oppenheimer Blue, a 14.6-carat blue diamond, for more than $57 million, and officials remain hopeful that the Blue Royale can surpass that amount.
Good morning. Central parts of the country will see loud rain today with thunder and lightning. Rain starting in the upper parts of the Gyeonggi-do will expand to the rest of the central regions as the day goes on today. Then rain clouds will move further south. And until Saturday, Gangwon-do province could see up to 40 millimeters. The capital area will see 5 to 20 millimeters of showers. Then the south coast could see up to 50 millimeters of heavy rainfall. Afternoon highs will be 2 to 5 degrees, lower than yesterday, but still way above the norms. Seoul gets up to 21 degrees, Daegu, Gwangju topping out at 25 degrees Celsius this afternoon. But dust levels could get high at night in the capital. It's going to rain through Saturday in the south, but the sun returns to central parts of the country. Sunday looks to be a rainy one nationwide, which will continue into next Monday. Then please brace yourselves for winter chill next week, with morning temperatures hovering around just 5 degrees Celsius here in Seoul. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day and Arirang. We'll be back next week for Monday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.